Today I'm going to do analysis of the concept of arguments. This is from logic, elementary logic for first year BA LLB SEM 1 Mumbai University. So let us understand the concept of arguments. An argument is a structured, very important, structured set of statements or propositions intended to support a conclusion. Propositions are basically statements having a true or a false value. So an argument is a structured set of statements or propositions intended to support a conclusion. Understanding arguments requires analyzing their purpose, their content, language, and structure and form. This is essential for critical thinking, legal reasoning, and effective decision making. First, let us understand the purpose of arguments. The primary purpose of an argument is to persuade, justify, or explain. Arguments aim to provide reasons that demonstrate why particular conclusion should be accepted. In persuasion, arguments convince others to adopt a viewpoint. Example, a lawyer persuades a jury that the defendant is innocent by presenting evidence and reasoning. In justification, arguments defend a belief or action. Example, explaining why stricter environmental laws are necessary by citing scientific data. In explanation, arguments clarify why something is the case. Example, a scientist argues how global warming is linked to carbon emissions. So this is the purpose of the arguments. Now let us look at the content of the arguments. The content refers to the propositions or statements that form the argument. These include premises and conclusions. Premises are the reasons or the evidence supporting the conclusion, and the conclusion is the claim that the argument seeks to establish. Example, premise 1, regular exercise improves cardiovascular health. Premise 2, good cardiovascular health reduces the risk of chronic diseases. Conclusion is regular exercise reduces the risk of chronic diseases. So we have cardiovascular health and good cardiovascular health common for both of them. So we say that regular exercise reduces the risk of chronic diseases. In legal reasoning, the content often involves facts, evidence, and legal precedents that support a claim. Now let us look at the language of the argument. Language plays a key role in shaping the clarity and persuasiveness of an argument. The effectiveness of an argument depends on precision, consistency, and neutrality. Precision is basically avoiding vague or ambiguous terms. Consistency means using terms uniformly throughout the argument, and neutrality means avoiding emotionally charged language that biases reasoning. Example, biased language. Anyone who opposes this policy is foolish. So one should avoid this kind of premises or this kind of statements or this kind of language. Neutral language. Opponents of this policy argue that it has unintended economic consequences. So this is a neutral language. In legal or academic contexts, precise and neutral language ensures that arguments are based on logic and not emotions. Let us look at the structure and the form of arguments. The structure or form determines how propositions are organized to support the conclusion. Common structures include deductive arguments, inductive arguments, and analogical reasoning. So deductive arguments guarantee the conclusion if the premises are true. Example, syllogisms. Syllogisms basically has a major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion. Inductive arguments suggest a probable conclusion based on evidence. Analogical reasoning draws comparisons to argue for similar outcomes in similar cases, like precedents. Example of deductive argument. Premise 1, all humans are mortal. Premise 2, Socrates is a human, and the conclusion is Socrates is mortal. Example of inductive argument. Premise, 90% of the students who studied passed the exam. Conclusion is, if I study, I'll probably pass the exam. This is the example of inductive argument. Now, how to identify, evaluate, interpret, and construct arguments. Step 1. Identifying arguments. To identify an argument, look for indicator words such as because, therefore, thus, hence. These are indicator words to identify an argument. Second, distinguish between premises and conclusion. Third is to ensure that the statements have a logical relationships. Example, sentence. Single renewable energy reduces emissions. Governments should invest in it. Premise is renewable energy reduces emissions, and the conclusion is governments should invest in renewable energy. Step 2 is to evaluate or evaluating the arguments. To evaluate an argument, check for validity, that is logical structure, and soundness, that is the truth of the premises. Very important. So to evaluate arguments, we have to check for its validity, that is its logical structure should be valid, and it should be soundness. It should have soundness, that is its premises must be true. Second is identifying fallacies such as hasty generalization or circular reasoning. Third is assess the relevance and sufficiency of the evidence provided. Assess the relevance and sufficiency of the evidence provided. How strong and how relevant is the evidence? Example, argument, crime rates dropped after few curfew laws. Therefore, curfews prevent crime. Evaluation. Correlation does not imply causation. Other factors may explain the drop in the crime. Interpreting arguments. Step 3. To interpret an argument, analyze the context. Example, legal, scientific, or social. Clarify ambiguous terms or assumptions. Determine the implication of the argument. Example, freedom of speech is essential for democracy. This is the argument. Interpretation is, does this argument account for limitations on speech such as hate speech or incitement? Fourth, constructing arguments. To construct an argument, clearly define the issue or the question. Very important. Gather relevant premises based on evidence or reasoning. And third, organize the premises to logically lead to the conclusion. And fourth, avoid fallacies and ensure clarity. Example, issue is, should governments ban single-use plastics? Premise 1, single-use plastics contribute significantly to environmental pollution. Premise 2, alternatives to single-use plastics are widely available and affordable. And conclusion is, governments should ban single-use plastics. Importance in critical thinking, legal reasoning, and decision making. First, critical thinking. Identifying flaws in reasoning enhances problem solving. Example, spotting a logical fallacy in a business proposal ensures better decision making. 2. Legal reasoning. Argument. Arguments are central to building legal cases and interpreting laws. Example, a lawyer constructs an argument using evidence and legal precedents to defend a client. Third, decision making. Evaluating competing arguments leads to informed decisions. Example, policymakers rely on arguments for and against policies to determine the best course of action. Finally, let us conclude. Analyzing arguments by focusing on their purpose, content, language, and structure is a vital skill. Analyzing arguments by focusing on their purpose, the content, language, and structure is a vital skill. By identifying, evaluating, interpreting, and constructing arguments, we enhance our ability to think critically, reason legally, and make sound decisions. Whether in courts, classrooms, or daily life, mastery of argumentation allows us to navigate complex problems with clarity and logic. Thank you for listening. Do subscribe, share with your friends. Thank you.